Yo, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the podcast. It's been like a week and a half since we've done a podcast. Don't worry, we're not going anywhere. We've just made some changes to how we're doing things now. Instead of doing 2 a week, we've decided that we're going to slow down a bit, take our time on these. We're not trying to rush information out there, nor Cliff or I, or neither one of us are trying to make a career out of this podcast. So we're not necessarily trying to just put daily content out so that we can entertain the public and get, money back or anything like that. That's not what we're after. So we're going to take our time and we're going to cut these back to once a week. It'll be every Wednesday night at 9 p.m. U.S. Central Time. So instead of Wednesday and Saturday, it's only going to be Wednesday. What we're hoping for by doing that is that we're going to actually bring a better stream to you. We're going to have more valuable content. The material that we've prepared is going to be better thought out. It's going to be better delivered. Overall, I think you are overall going to get a better product from us if we just take our time and give it to you once a week. Okay? So that's all I really got to say about that. Topic of tonight is global banking. Cliff's going to be really taking the charge on this. I'm not by any means unfamiliar with this topic, but I really think Cliff is probably going to teach me something here as well. Going back in a little bit into the history of global banking, some of the key figures that are always involved. I know this is just Cliff's specialty, but the reason why we wanted to go into this, you might think, okay, this is a topic that has just been beat into the dirt for so long. But the reality is that a lot of people still are not getting this. They're still not understanding how these things work. Now, as we go through the stream tonight, I want you to keep in mind that people have dedicated their entire lives and their entire careers to this topic alone. What you have to keep in mind is that this is one of, if not the most complex and impactful tool that the elite have used to literally enslave the people. Now, when I say enslave, I don't mean quite literally like physically enslaving you, but you get the idea. It's extremely complex. So as we're going through the stream tonight, don't get upset if we don't cover certain things. We're not trying to cover every single little detail. We will in future streams. Tonight, we want to get kind of a broad perspective. We want to just get a good viewpoint at this from an aerial perspective so that we can understand where to look from here. So without any further ado from me, Mr. Cliff Rockefeller, what's up, brother?
Howdy, howdy. Thanks for being here, people.
Yeah, thanks for being here.
So, it's definitely something we just spoke about before the show. I'd like to just reiterate that this type of knowledge of the power elite, occult, banking, kings, queens, rulers, all of this stuff is incredibly occultic. It is the core of the occult, you could say. I didn't realize, I didn't have a clue what money was compared to what I know today. So we'll start with a bit of history, and hopefully we can get an idea of what banking is.
Mm-hmm.
So with regards to most things, especially occultic subjects, it's always good to go back as far as we can go to find out where things come from. And by doing that, you can see the evolution into today's world. So you can get a very clear understanding of how these pieces work. And the reason why people don't understand international banking is because they usually stop at the money, currency, the idea of a building that gives money in that. But where in reality, banking is so much bigger and so much different to what you would think. So we'll start with, I've just got a Wikipedia of history of banking, and we'll just sort of dance our way through to get a feel for it, because there's so much information. A lot of it is interesting, you'll find. If you do your own research into areas, you'll find that it is very interesting to study. That's why I've done it for so long. Because you see, the government, what people call government, is really the bankers. It is the rulers, true rulers, which is a ruler. You have a ruler in school. The ruler was made of cane. All right, the ruler was made of cane. So the word cane goes back to king as well. So rulers, kings, canes. We have Freemasonry. You have the compass and square, which is a measuring tool for building. So what is all this stuff? You'll find Freemasonry is absolutely intimate with banking as well. Uh, so the whole system, just to start with, the whole system that we call civilization is based on money and banking. So this is really where I like to study, play, work with being free. There's even psychology will come into it, as we'll see. So we can see here history of banking according to Wiki. Again, Wikipedia is not the final say. It's a good thing to get introduced to a subject because at least it works similar to an encyclopedia. And if there's something that doesn't seem right from what you've already understood, then you go and do your own research from there. But it's still very good. A lot of stuff I've posted to mates over the years, they think, yeah, fuck, I mean, this article is very deep. The issue being that if we know that the information we're being given is deep, it's not shallow surface public news, fake news, whatever you want to call it. The truth on anything is deep, and this is why it's so dizzying. It's almost like the deeper we go in our understanding, the higher we're climbing up the mountain of knowledge. And typically, when you dig deep in yourself to search for the understanding of what you're learning, it can seem dizzying, So don't be scared of that. It's normal. It will hurt your brain to understand these things because nobody's taught you this. This is how you're enslaved. So, okay. So history of banking, Assyria, Sumeria. This is how far. They're saying about 2000 BC here, but really it goes back even further. With your own research and looking at it, it goes deeper. And the thing with Wiki is that on a generalization like history of banking, it will just start at Sumeria. And Wikipedia will give you truth about what's further back, but you have to give it the right words. If you give it the right subject matter, it'll give you some more research on it. So that's a good way of using Wikipedia. So don't think that it will end there. It's just that we don't know the words. So by clicking on the links through Wikipedia articles and going deeper, and especially if they're broken, go and research it because it's usually important. But if you go into these links, you'll find a deeper part 2, say banking. That will be an offshoot that you can then get back on the trail at a deeper level. So that's the way I understand it so far. So anyway, so we've got Assyria, all that. Then what's it going through? Ancient Greece, of course, right? Roman Empire, of course. Most people know the history of this. Lenders based in temples, Holy Roman Empire, not Holy Roman, just a Roman Empire. A bank was called a bench, right? You can easily look that up. It doesn't say it here. That's just coming off what I'm saying.
Sure.
So bench in Latin is bank, right? Or became bank in English. So now where do we see a bench? We have a judge on the bench. You have a bench warrant. So what it is a bank warrant straight away. So what the hell is this judge? And what the hell is he doing there with his wig on and the black robe with the bench? Well, and why is he charging you? He's charging you. Why? What is he going to tase you? No, he's going to charge you money, always. So the court system now starts to straight away become part of the banking system. Incredible, eh? I mean, most people don't know this. As you learn how these things work, especially how the banking system works, and that it runs civilization, you'll start to see how Freemasonry works, why Freemasonry works, how the knights, what they call the knights, work with banks or are bankers, how royalty are bankers, how that works, how it all fits together. So all of this stuff is so interconnected and huge that people just give up. They think, I don't know. But if you start to see that these things are connected, it all starts to make sense.
That's an interesting concept. Court systems and the banks are actually
Yeah.
very much more connected than just, I mean, it's always the old saying that, the court systems are just trying to squeeze money out of people. Well, maybe that's true, but maybe not necessarily for the reasons you think.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, straight off, I mean, in New Zealand or the Commonwealth countries, the judge or especially high court judges, but generally judges are meant to be standing in for the king or queen of Britain. They're the magi straight. They call them
Mm-hmm.
magi straights. Straight is a measurement, magi is magic. So it gets occultic. But they stand in for the queen, right, in all Commonwealth countries. So do they do that in America? Well, there's lots of smoke screens, but I would assume from the knowledge that we'll get to eventually, you'll see that the British system is the same thing all around the world. It's just that they've modified it a little bit for each country. So yeah, there's definitely a link there, and eventually we'll see that. So where are we now? So they're talking about the Roman Empire lenders based in their temples. See, so now we've got religion and banks tied together. Temples, right? Straight away. There's religion tied in with money, while accepting deposits and performing the change of money. So this is as far back as the Roman Empire. They're
Mm-hmm.
doing change of money. In other words, it's becoming a convenience for a fee. It's just a business. Hey, we've got this receipt. We've got this uh, registered receipt, and we will protect your record or property, real property, gold or they'd put in the old days they'd put assets in with the bankers, and in special storage, and they'd have security and that, and you'd have to pay for that.
Mm-hmm.
Makes sense, right? Makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
See, this is where this whole government protection system comes from. They're meant to be there to protect your property as the bankers. And they give you a receipt for everything you do. Everything you do, you get a receipt. So this is all quite interesting too. So fiat currency is a receipt, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's a promise to pay, even today. Yeah. So we're dealing with receipts. We're not dealing with gold anymore. So yeah, archaeology from this period, ancient China and India shows evidence of money lending too, back as far as the Roman Empire. And then, of course, it goes right up through Europe. What else we got here? I won't go too much into that. The history of banking is intertwined, right? The history of banking, of course, this is true, is intertwined with the history of money. Of course, because the banks are, basically the banks are a registry. This is why you get the word king and regis. Regis this and regis that is king. So regis
Mm-hmm.
is the king. It's again, a protection of your property, supposedly. Uh, History of money, ancient types of money, known as grain money, right? Which is, again, trading just goods that are valuable.
Mm-hmm.
So money's always been something of value generally back in history, because that's what we want protecting. We don't give a shit about much else. As long as we got protected food and we can trade in food and we get this thing of trade going on, we can make civilization work. Makes
So,
sense, eh?
so while we're on the topic of history and banking as well, how much do you know about? Because the Knights Templar had set up a banking system, and that was the kind of part of the whole Friday the 13th ordeal was that King Philip owed a lot of money to the Knights Templar because the Knights Templar had created this banking system that was very successful. And they were very successful in part because King Philip was funding all of these wars, and he was borrowing money from the Knights Templar. So there's sort of speculation. There was this document released that was called the Chinon Parchment that was supposed to be their confession to the Pope at the time, that they had blasphemed Jesus. They had to spit on a cross, and they were worshiping this goat head looking thing, and performing all kind of satanic sex rituals, etc., etc. And it was supposed to be their confession to the Pope. So the King Philip, has them burned on the cross on a Friday the 13th. This is where the whole Friday the 13th thing came about. But there was also speculation that the whole Chinon parchment could have been completely manifested out of nothing, and that King Philip actually just had them killed to relieve himself of the debt that he owed them. So there's kind of that's been a debate for quite a while between different historians and whatnot.
Sure.
You just kind of take your own perspective, but that's an interesting thing there to see that tie, like you said, between religion and banking is right there with the Knights Templar as well. And that's not that far back. This isn't. I mean, you're going all the way back to 2000 BC in the Roman Empire. This was much more modern than that, but
Sure. Yeah. And yeah, that's the sort of thing that goes on through history
mm-hmm,
with these characters, we'll call them, all the time. The knights, the kings, the bankers, the priests, all of these people work together. They're what David Icke calls shapeshifters because they change their sides all the time. They cheat everybody. They double cross everybody. This is why the British flag is a double cross. This
mm-hmm.
is why they're um, Britain, not the English people, but Britain, the corporation. It is for what do they call it? Uh, it basically perfidious Britain. It was known as because, in other words, it changes sides all the time. 1 minute it's a friend of Germany, the next it's the enemy. Same with France. They 1 minute Germany's at war with France, the next it's not. They're all through
Mm-hmm.
history, and this is not because of the kings necessarily wanting to kill each other. It's also to get the population under control. It is to raise commerce through activity, and it is to create a major leap in technology, which is
Mm-hmm.
for everything in civilization. They've said, the elites have said, I can't remember exactly where, but if you look it up, you'll find it, where war, or they can get more change in 5 years of war or 4 years of war than 20 years of propaganda and peace.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So they use war as a revolution to create revolutionary ideas and new things. So it pushes and squeezes humanity into a new order, so to speak.
Sure.
So this is how they actually operate, and we can see it. And Wiki will tell you all this, but it's in the details.
Hell, war was the justification for income taxes.
Yeah, yeah, of course. Yeah, well, to beat down on the people again.
Mm-hmm.
So what have they got here? Yeah, 9,000 BC, they're trading all that kind of thing. So, it's always been here. I mean, most people know that. And I'm not going to get too much into the ancient past like that because it's not worth it. There's too much destruction that's happened over those years of 10,000 to 5,000 BC, maybe 4,000 BC, that has made it so messy and so vague that we may as well just continue from what we'd call Cana, right? So Cana, you've heard of that,
Mm-hmm.
or Canaan, right, was in the Levant. Again, there's where Israel and all that stuff. So Cana is Canaanite, right? Canaanite. And the word night is where you get the word night. Canaanite, K-N-I-G-H-T, night. So Canaanite, if we look up Canaanite, and I did this the other day, and every time I look at this stuff, I learn something new. And so Canaanite means, in Hebrew or Phoenician Canaanite, because that is the true description of Hebrew language is actually Phoenician Canaanite or Canaanite language. It's not Hebrew. I can't find a link, but basically what it's saying is that they're merchant bankers. Cana means merchant. Merchant is mer, which is the water, like a mermaid. You get Mercury. Mercury, if you look it up, the planet Mercury, is to do with commerce and business.
Really?
So, yeah, all of this is connected. This is why you have a mercenary. Mercenary is a hired guy that gets into a club, a gang, and will be hired by kings or rulers to go and fight for whatever. They're mercenaries. So merchant, what's chant? Chant is a hypnotic way of speaking, technically. It's a chanting. It's in chanting. In you, chanting. So this is what they do. They're honey mouth, They're experts at communication, which is a deep subject, right? Communication can be the way to get humans to do what you want them to do. So now we start to see, just with the beginning of modern banking, Canaanite is got relationship to the knighthoods. It's got relation to the sea, where you get admiralty, and that money is water. And then you also get an inkling of brainwashing through chanting or enchanting or magic, or see how this stuff gets deep and esoteric just by the words.
So I'd be interested. I mean, you'd have to find almost a scholar to look back at, the knights and chase that back all the way back to the Canaanites, because I bet you could find it to actually
Absolutely.
trace that back. But it is
Absolutely.
interesting to see
Absolutely.
just seeing it in the language.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, you will find most of this stuff on Wikipedia. You will.
And
It's just that, like I said, it's hidden because you'll get to a brick wall and you think, that's all it's going to tell me, but you didn't use the right word. There's another
mhm,
word that opens up another lot of knowledge because it's an encyclopedia, and then you can start to go back again. Like here's one. Typically, I'd like to do a show on Zionism, so people get their head straight with what it actually is and the facts of where it came from.
mhm,
So um, a lot of people stop at World War II or just after World War II, the Balfour Declaration, etc. But it goes way back further. And if you go way back further with using the right words again to find the right uh, instruments to show you what it is, um, you have to do a lot of study. You have to ask a lot of questions,
right.
to get to these things. But so I've done all this a long time ago. This is just me recapping.
Hmm.
So, okay, so after Cana, we go up into Greece, right? And then we've got as we went over the other week, we've got the intelligentsia,
Hmm.
which is Plato and all that stuff. So all of these guys were in with the rulers, big time, you know. Um, and so they obviously had banking back then in Greece. They had money. They had very similar techniques to today, believe it or not, but they're just colored differently or worded differently. Then we get to Rome, and technically Rome is just incredibly advanced. You know, that was why it took over the world. It was so powerful. That was their big leap forward. Their symbol a lot of the time of the Romans was red. You know, which is the revolutionary idea again, is based on red. This is why the British coat of arms is red still. So now when we go past Rome and the fall of Rome, a lot of people get lost here, and I used to. But if you even again looking at Wikipedia, you'll start to see that the Germanic race, and this is why I want to get into Zionism because it's particularly associated with German. If you look at the German idea, the German race, and where it comes from, you'll start to find that and why I'm talking about Germany is because after the fall of Rome, the banking system went hardcore into Germany massively. It was another leap forward for the modern form of banking
Hmm.
and banking houses and new techniques of control.
Hmm.
So it's incredibly huge bit of history here. But the German race, Caucasian goes right back to the Middle East, the Caucasus Mountains, Caucasian. So right around Iran, above Iran, and all that kind of thing around there. And so then even go back as far as the pharaohs, you'll see, and a lot of us have seen this, where they've found the pharaoh mummies. If they took the bandages off, they'd find that they were white people with red hair. They weren't like
Wow.
dark Arabs
Yeah.
and that, they're white people. So this is where we get into a thing called druidism. Well, everyone's heard of the magicians and druidism.
Hmm.
So we're getting into all of this is all occult. It's amazing stuff to study. The bottom line is that the Caucasians, or what they call the Germans, they're all over the world. I mean, the world's got a massive history, but after Rome, the German or Caucasian people were intermingling with the Spanish, of course, right? And so when say like we'll bring the Jew thing in now, so where you get the Semitic, if you look up Semitic, it's actually Spanish, right? And then you've got Ashkenazi, which is German. So they would have intermingled, and you get these types of skin color where they're darkish skin, but they're white people. You know what I mean? Like a Romanian
Hmm.
is a dark-skinned white guy, and a Frenchman is generally dark-skinned-ish, but he's still a white guy. Then you
Sure.
get German, and they're severely white. So this is why we get confused. So if you look back, you'll find that the Germans are linked to the Franks, what they call the Franks, which turns into France. So we're talking people here, general people, and then England, etc. This is why you've got the British royalty is German. There's Saxe-Coburg-Gotha. So, and why? Because they're into the banking, and as I said, it came out of the Holy Roman Empire. All right, so we'll go back to the Holy Roman Empire, and so banking really took off then in a global way, and then of course all the time it's enslaving people. I mean they're going back as far as Egypt. They would name the slave Toby the slave. They'd name him, and they would give him a you know how on the Valentine's gifts you got a heart, and you give one each, and one's got a part and the other's got the part, and you link them together and you're a couple. Well, that's the sort of thing the slave masters would do in Egypt. He'd have to have a key that fits with the master around his neck with his name. But they named the creature back then. To name the creature and then call the creature is part of the brainwashing.
Hmm.
And this is going back as far as Egypt. So
Yeah.
all of that goes right through Cana, etc., of people, the bankers especially, controlling the resources, which includes people, right? Obviously, because people are resources,
Hmm.
includes people by getting them to work for you and to get them to do what they want for you, and then to finally get it intergenerational so the children grow up into slavery and they don't know. So this has gone on for years, this idea of intergenerational slavery. And this is why the bankers are separate in their breeding and everything from the rest of the human race, because they're holding on to the truth and the power and the control. And the humans, for so long, the other people, what they call the Gentiles, are conditioned into another form of life, another culture, another cultural system, right? So this is why I'm saying that banking is so much deeper than just money. It's the
Sure.
control of people. Period. It's just the
and
control of people.
I think we could probably agree that the most valuable resource on the planet Earth is probably just human labor. So just touching off of what you're talking about there, that is to consider that humans, could be a potential asset, and their labor is an asset, is in property through this banking system is quite astonishing. I mean, that is the most useful resource you could ever have. It's just
Yep.
intergenerational people that believe that the very system that they're partaking in is just fine. There's nothing wrong here.
Yep. And the people. Oh, what the? Can you hear me? Oh, okay.
Everything good there? Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And the people. What was I going to say? Yeah. And so the people give value to the money.
Hmm.
The people, without people giving value to diamonds, they'd be worth nothing. Without people giving value to gold, it'd be nothing. It's just an idea of
Sure.
value.
Hmm.
And it could, okay, when it gets more realistic in terms of value, in a realistic sense, you're talking a basic tenet of banking, which is known for thousands of years, which is supply and demand.
Hmm.
So supply and demand is a technique, period, across the board, that can be manipulated. Like for years and years, bankers with their armies, because you see, if you control the money, you can hire the mercenaries, and this is what military are. They're just mercenaries. You can hire them. You got the money. You can, and this is how they do it. So you can therefore do hell for manipulation with the armies, um, and so that's simple, really, when you look at it like that.
Hmm.
He who controls the money controls the people, and most people want the convenience. So it's a quid pro quo. This is why the people accept money, because it's convenient. So
Sure.
they've obviously gone through that way. So all of that convenience thing was boosted in the Holy Roman Empire. From the Holy Roman Empire, with World War One and World War Two, of course, there's tons of information of conspiracy going on behind the scenes there. After that, it goes to Britain. Of course, Britain started to dominate in the banking world with London, the city of London, etc. And then, and what they call these reigns of domination of banking, empire. That's the first name. So you got empire and empirism, or empress, imperial, imperative, imperator is Roman too. Uh, so when you get that type of thing, you've got the thing called a hegemony, which is what do you do with the hedge? You trim a hedge. Well, what's the trimming of the hedge? It's the interest, the cream off the top that we take. The profit is the hegemony. So the hegemony is the leading currency of the world. It's the banking boss of the world, you could say, is the hegemony. So the torch of hegemony was then sent from Britain to the United States, which we know, which is now the global currency, was the US dollar. Again, a hegemonic dollar. Right, so that's why now all of this stuff of banking and in the global finance goes back to New York again, which is British, New York rate, etc. Mm-hmm. Manhattan. Why do they call it Manhattan? Man and Hatton. Why the hat? Because you wear many hats. That's part of it too. They're changing sides. They're in and out of politics and private corporations and military corporations. They're changing their hats. And it's powerful. I use it. I use it in commerce. Today I'm this, today I'm that.
Sure, yeah.
You have many hats. Hey. So they really teach you, the bankers are cunning. They teach you how to be cunning. So technically you're learning evil because you could take advantage of these techniques that bankers use. And again, This is why judges are so hard to figure out, because they're very good at the mercantile. They're selling merchant law. The judges even today is law merchant. That's why it's so militaristic. Yeah. Out of it. Oh, another thing with Cana. There's another thing with Cana I learned. Mm-hmm. So if you look up the color associated with Cana, you'll find purple. Purple, right? So if you mix red and blue together, you get purple in the middle. It's like a dialectic. You'll mix the red and the blue.
Yeah.
So there's the banker again. The banker sits between the debtor and the creditor, and he's the resolution, the dialectic.
That's interesting. So how'd you come up with purple? Where does purple come from?
Well, I looked up when I was looking at Cana again. Mm-hmm. I can't find the site, but if you look up Cana and look at the color and stuff, it'll tell you it's purple. Yeah. I just found it the other day and went, okay. There you go, eh? Yeah. Doesn't surprise me, because the policy is red and blue. The police cars are red and blue lights.
Sure.
Everything in a dialectic is generally red and blue, symbolically speaking. You had Russia and America was red and blue. So the judge, the banker in the middle, who doesn't play politics. They don't play politics. The bankers are realists. They're realists. They don't do politics. Politics is ideology and religion. Mm-hmm. They give you the ideology and religion. They don't play that game. They're realists. So how do you get your head around what they call political realism? Is Machiavelli. Niccolo Machiavelli. He's a political realist, which means that he doesn't give a shit about your ideology. He wants to know the facts. And he'll go, and who did Machiavelli work for? The kings and queens of this world, of the European aristocracy. He'd go and give them discourses. This is what I can do for you. So he was a world-renowned technocrat of his time that worked for the bankers. All right. I mean, I'm cramming a hell of a lot of stuff in there.
Oh no, yeah, you're good. I know. It's a lot. It's a lot to go into, but
yeah. And I could I'll go back over what I posted. Hang on, because there might be something here I can bite
I was
into.
checking out some of these, some of the bankers here we've got.
Okay. Yep.
It must just be a requirement that you must be extremely ugly to be a banker.
Yeah.
Good God.
Yeah, while you're looking at
Look at
that,
this guy.
yeah, while you're looking at that, that's really good because I've got that page here as well. And if you look at these guys who are called bankers, well, that's what I mean. They're people that you wouldn't think were bankers. See, a lot of people know Rothschild, Rockefeller, and all that. And I mean, we all know that. But look at who else is here. You've got um, Father George Bush of actual Herbert Walker Bush, which was the junior's granddaddy. He's a
Hmm.
banker, right? And his son worked for the CIA. Why? Because the bankers run the CIA. And why? Because it goes back to the OSS. Who set up the OSS? MI6 and the Vatican set up the OSS. See, so all of this stuff is one world government already in place, really. It's just that they want to make it real now. They want to bring it out of the esoteric into the exoteric, so we accept it. That's where they're
Check
at with
this
it,
dude
really.
out down here. How do you say his name? Hajlamar Schach. I don't know. He's German and Danish, but
Uh,
he's a spitting image of Hitler. Like he looks
yeah.
almost identical.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. So you got Robert McNamara. He's a very interesting character. By the way, all of these people, check them out, especially the ones that jump out at you, because they're very fascinating people with a lot of knowledge. So
Hmm.
you've got Christine Lagarde as the head of the IMF, the International Monetary Fund. So I guess that qualifies as a banker.
Oh yeah.
You've got Mario Draghi. Draghi. He works for the European Union. He was the guy that dictated to Greece after the revolution. They went through a uprising, a revolution, a spring. What do they call it? A uh, spring uprising or something. They called it, didn't they? And
Who?
they in Greece, the last time Greece hit when it had its major crash in
Oh yeah,
2008,
yeah, 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 yeah.
Mario
Huge.
Draghi was the guy negotiating with the new leader of the
Yep.
revolution, which was probably agitated, of course, by the economy. Economy.
Hmm.
Yeah, they're not wasting words because why? Because they're lawyers. They're at least lawyers. Lawyer is low down to banking, but
Sure.
they're lawyers. You have to know the law to be a banker. You can forget it to being a true banker without knowing the law. So they're lawyers, and what are lawyers? They're experts in words. See, so now we see that
Absolutely.
banking is all to do with selling. It's mercantile. It's communication. It's persuasion. Right? That's why they give us politicians which are trained in social sciences. They're trained in how to speak to the mob in a certain way that you can't get a hold of anything. They're strategically put there by the bankers. This is why that's why I laugh when I say people vote. It's strategically put there for you by the bankers to lead you literally where you want to go or where you don't want to
Mm-hmm.
go.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, using words.
And I
Yeah.
think most people probably get the perspective of that in the United States, anyways, with the Federal Reserve System. I mean, you can
Yes.
really just you already know that they're not accountable in any way to the government in any way. I mean, so that right there alone you should ask yourself why. What do you mean they're not accountable? They're not even audited. So we have a Federal Reserve System that is a actual private sector bank that is not even audited or accountable to the government in any way. That's so
Yeah.
it's really bizarre to say that we have a government, quote unquote government, that is supposed to represent the people, yet the very group of people that are
Yep.
supposed to produce, if you will,
Yep.
money for our country, they're not accountable to anything or anybody. That's because they're the ones running the show, essentially.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, well, see, there's more doublespeak. It's the words they're using. Represent the people. We're here to represent you. Well, what the hell does that mean? Hey,
Yeah,
you know.
yeah,
And then, of course, going back to the red and the blue and the purple is the bankers. Well, the, what is the thing that's purple? It's a thing in the middle. It's a middle. What's a middle? He's a middleman. Well, what's a middleman? Well, we all think, what's a middleman? A middleman is an entrepreneur. A middleman, what's an entrepreneur? An entrepreneur generally makes deals. He'll buy low and he'll sell high and he'll make a profit. He's a middleman. And that's what the courts are doing. They're making controversy and then they'll make money off the controversy. They'll tempt you into the crime, or what they call crime, and then they'll blame you for it. That type of thing. So it's just a total game, and they'll play on our weaknesses to make money, basically, and be a middleman, like agitate the thing to make business, even.
Mm-hmm.
And this goes into the whole idea of the nobles in banking. And noble, what is noble? Noble is like he who dares wins. He who does incredible feats of daring is awarded knighthoods. It doesn't. This is why the media moguls or the media people that sell you the bullshit get knighted. U2 with his Sunday Bloody Sunday, which is the British shooting a whole lot of Irish people for nothing, for just trying to get some kind of a life under the tyranny, and he's getting knighted by the Queen. So it's all. All you need to do is study knighthoods. This is why the U.S. government has all of its leaders with the huge jackets and the lapels and all the colours. You see the huge colours on their chest. They're medals. They're knighthoods, but they don't show you as a medal because then you're giving the game away. So you just have little coloured things on your chest. They're medals. The medals comes from the bankers of nobility. That give you honors, which is a banking term, honor. Right? So they know humans inside out. They know us better than we know ourselves. And this is the whole thing of to discover this stuff. It's empowering, because if these guys can do it and they're human, well, then I think I can do it.
Sure.
Yeah, and we're bankers, man. We are bankers, but they just didn't tell you. They don't give you that information, of course. You are to be told what to think.
That's the unfortunate reality, isn't it?
Yeah, that's the unfortunate reality. So where was the other links? Let's have a look.
Global financial system
Mm-hmm.
is the worldwide framework of legal agreements, institutions, and both formal and informal economic actors that together facilitate international flows of financial capital for purpose of investment and trade financing.
Yeah, so let's just have a look at that. And again, the words should not be taken lightly. They're very occultic. Words are incredibly occultic. So let's go over it slowly. The global financial, that name in itself the words are interesting, is the worldwide framework. Now you've got Freemasonry, frames and measurements of legal. Legal means registry. It's legality is a registry. It's lodged. It's another Freemasonic term, lodge. You lodge the legality. Agreements is contracts. Institutions that should be looked at, both formal and informal. Formal is like admiralty. Formal is the public. These are basic things that people need to know. Informal's off the record. Formal's on the record.
Mm-hmm.
Economic actors. We've got here economic actors. That's a multiple-pronged word.
Sure.
International flows. There's the water again of financial capital. So capital. You got Capitol Hill in the United States. You got Capitol Hill in ancient Rome. You got capital letters on the name. You got capital requirements. So what is capital? Capital is value. No, capital is just value. It's not even money. It's just value. We can go into later in some other talks, we can go into a thing called mysticism, which goes into banking again, believe it or not. Mysticism goes into value. So we can get into that at another stage of how do we find value? It's to do with mysticism.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with that topic whatsoever, so that'd be real interesting.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you show me a magic trick, I might send you $5 in PayPal.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, it is. It's just magic tricks. They got the hood. They're the Brotherhood. With the hoodwink, you got hoodwinked by the Brotherhood, the knighthood,
Yep.
right? The hood, this, hood, that. Um, you
Brothers in
know,
the Hood.
yeah, brothers in the hood, but yeah, brotherhood again, brother of
Hmm.
Freemasonry again. Um, the which cup is the money in? That type of thing. Look at my left hand. Don't look at what the right's doing.
Yep.
That type of thing. Uh, and again, the whole thing goes into cunning. They're cunning. That's all they are. They're cunning. Again, a lot of people will probably say, why not mention the Jewish thing? We can at another topic, but that particular topic I'd probably bring up is into Zionism.
Yeah.
If we're going to talk about the Jewish financial link of the bankers, because that is a big link in the bankers. They're called Zenosh in the Jewish system. They're called the Zenosh bankers, and yeah, they are a big part of it, but they're not at the top. You'll find they're not because there's a whole lot of information there that needs to be totally cleared up. It's too vague. You know. Okay, what else? Any other questions while I'm looking at this? Just go right ahead.
No, as you're going through this is all just a different perspective. Like you said, I've always looked at global banking from a perspective of like, okay, we've got these organizations. We've got the World Bank. We've got the IMF. What are they doing in order to control different countries? So if I've always looked at the actions that they've taken currently in more modern time. That's always been where my focus is when I'm like, okay, they've bought this property here, they give loans to this country, and then that country basically goes bankrupt. So then they gain access to natural resources that they would not have had otherwise. That's always the kind of stuff that I've looked at when it comes to banking. When we get into sort of this deeper understanding of where a lot of it roots from and what it actually is. This is, I mean, admittedly so. It's all new to me. So this is something that I'm just trying to feed my mind and wrap my mind around a bit. It's quite deep. I'm really interested in looking at the. It just seems like a lot of it goes back to, like you said, knighthood, and sort of
Yeah.
the whole
Yep.
knights thing.
Yeah, because it goes into the mystery religion. There's a thing called the mystery religion, and
Mm-hmm.
this is going into another religion behind the scenes. There's another religion behind the scenes. They give us a whole lot of bullshit, and that's definitely what's going on. The more you look at it, and so there's so much bullshit out there, but it echoes some truth. This is why the symbols and all that, you can learn from looking at the world and still try and trace it back to where it came from.
Right.
You start to still get an echo of truth. It's like the media will say, oh, someone got shot today and the cops are at their section or whatever. And that's the truth, but it doesn't mean everything that they told you was the truth. It's just that, and that's obviously how that works. So we get part truths, we get half truths. And ultimately we have to think for ourselves. That's what I'd always promote. If you can find something new, let's look at it. I'm really interested in facts if I can find them, though. I'm more of a fact finder.
Yeah.
And that's why these things are quite heavy, because they do seem to be pretty solid, what we've found. But yeah, so maybe we go to, say, the 1933 would be a good topic with the banking. So back in 1933, this was after the Great Depression, of course, around the Great Depression. And it's a lot to do with America too, of course, because the hegemony, again, the power's being transferred over to America at this stage.
Mm-hmm.
And so with the Great Depression, which was, of course, created by the bankers, there's manipulation all the time, economically, they had to come up with this thing called the New Deal. And now you're getting a new one called the Green New Deal. They're trying to push that down your throat. There was a little bit of a New Deal with the Bush Jr. when he said new freedom. He talked about new freedom with the terrorism and all that stuff.
Oh yeah.
So back to 1933, what happened was it was a very significant time because it was the introduction of a new system. So they bring in the chaos again with the Great Depression, and they bring in the order, which was the New Deal. And we mentioned the other week about Woodrow Wilson and Colonel Edward Mandell House, which is a banker. He is a banker from England. And no one could even talk to Roosevelt without first going through Mandell House, right? So this is quite amazing. This is a pattern in the banking thing too, by the way. For instance, if you look at that list of bankers again, you'll see a guy called Jack Satali on that little page you're looking at before. You'll see a guy called Jack Satali. And I've mentioned him before. He's a French technocratic banker who wrote a book called Winners and Losers in the New World Order. And you can go and get it for free on YouTube. It's really worth looking at because it's telling you about, But anyway, so again, you couldn't get to, I think it was that Francois Mitterrand guy. I think it was him. And so you couldn't talk to him without going through Atali, just like you couldn't go to Wilson without going through Mandell House, So they're kind of like a stoic, wise man of banking that steps in and has the last word and pretty much controls the politicians or presidents. And this is the interlink between banking and the political bullshit we're given, is the advisors to presidents and prime ministers are more powerful than obviously the prime minister and the presidents. So anyway, so back to this thing. So remember that Mandell House was talking about a New Deal system where he's going to a sleight of hand set up a system to enslave the people with a security bond. Remember?
Mm-hmm.
I can bring it up again if you want, but for those that don't know, go and look back in the last couple of talks and you'll find we mention a quote from Mandell House. Yep. So what happened was, why it was so important in 1933 is they started to call in the real money. They started to rein it in and make laws of necessity in a quid pro quo, which means equal, deal to give the people supposedly more freedom. And they calling in the gold, they're calling in the silver, and that was next. And this is global too, all the West especially, but pretty much the whole globe. So then, because there was no gold in society, or there was heading for that, they pretty much said, we're banning gold as a mainstream exchange. You can still do it, like barter and private and all that stuff, but you can't do it in a corporate public fashion or they'll kick your ass. So all corporations are controlled by the banking government system through the way they set up the corporational system. This is why they control the corporations. And so people had to comply, and then they get this new fiat currency, right? But what the deal was a thing called HJR 192. Have you heard of that?
Not that I know of. HJR 192, maybe. Maybe
House Joint.
Go into it.
Yeah, House Joint Resolution 192, and this made its rounds about 10 years ago with the sovereignty movement and probably even Posse Comitatus and all that stuff, which is the modern violent revolutionary people against government through the US and the world. So the changing of a substantive money had massive effects on the system because the system's built on money. So more evidence of the connection between money and the courts was that the taking of the money out of the system, the corporate public system, and replacing it with a fiat currency backed by nothing. It was a faith-based currency, was on a quid pro quo basis that the government would set off all debt, public and private. So what they did, so they set up the IRS and the IRD and the ATO and all these new tax things. They issued new birth certificates, which were a bond. And then they never told us what to do, did they?
Mm-mm.
They didn't put it in the education system. So straight away, the people lost right there. If they had changed the system right back then, why didn't they put it in the school system? Well, because of World War II. More chaos. Oh my God, look over here, we're being bombed. Blah. So nobody can get a hold of it. And then before you know it, you come out of the war and you're in this new system. So that's why the people lost a hold of this whole deal that they made. And if I've got a picture I can post sometime on this too, that was an old publication called Technocracy. And on the cover of the book, it's got a robot picking people up, I think it is. And it's saying 1933. Are we going to go this way or this way? And it was obviously suggesting that you go with technocracy, which was this new Bretton Woods fiat currency deal, which they could then. So why they actually did that was to create a flux, which gives them more room to move. With the gold and the substantiveness, it was very fixed. There was less mercy. You would have deaths around the whole Western world. They'd hang you. There was execution on the law, not operation of law. So now they come in with the 1933. It was now operation of the law, not execution of the law. The common law went out the window when gold disappeared too. Right, common law went out. And what did they replace it with? Equity. They replaced it with maritime equity in 1933 throughout the world. Interesting, eh? So, this is a whole nother subject that's very important. But I'll let you speak for a bit.
Well, I was just going to say, I mean, that they did this also knowing that there never in history, not one time in history, and this has been tried thousands of times, that we've went from a fixed type of currency like you're talking about with gold or silver, or something that has a very limited supply, and going to a fiat type currency. It's been tried thousands of times throughout history, and it has crashed every single time. There is not one single case where it has remained to exist. Not one. It's failed every time, and they know that. They know that it's going to crash. That's part of the design, in my opinion, is that by going to this, like you said, it gives them that flux. It gives them that ability to just produce more than there really is, right? So you can have more labor. So I mean, just for an example, think of the things that you have around your house. Have you really put in the amount of labor that it would take to earn and build all of the things around your house? Well, of course not. It's the money that you've used, or your currency, I should say, that you've exchanged for those things. But you haven't actually invested the time and labor to equal what you have earned. You really haven't. All the things that I have around my house, if I had to go and invest the man hours to build all of these different things, I would never have all the things that I have. Now apply that kind of same basic concept on a global scale from the government or the powers that be in banking. They can get a lot more out of it because they can just keep printing it out, and they can keep getting more man labor, more labor back from this. They can accomplish more just printing this out, but they know that it's a system that will eventually crash. So where do you think that plays into their role as far as the inevitable downfall of that system? I mean, that's part of their plan, obviously, but where does that go, do you think?
Yeah. Well, just first, another part. Glass-Steagall is another part of this. The 1932, just before it, Glass-Steagall made stability in the system and less flux. When they did the Glass-Steagall Act, they removed Glass-Steagall and then did the fiat currency, more flexibility. So what it really does is it leaves more scope for, and remember, all of this is quid pro quo. This is why they go along with it. And if they create oops, we made a war, oops, we did this and that, there's a crash, we can't let any crisis go to waste. See? So it gives them ease and flexibility to mold the system how they want it.
Yeah.
So it's not as precarious as people think. It's actually very much under control. Like they probably had in the Great Depression, they probably had it calculated how long it'd be before they brought in the new system. You know, let a few people starve, get some more laws and psychology in the game, and then bring in the new system, and so on. So that's what they're doing, you know. And so now we are here today, many years after, and the fiat currency is now going, of course, into a digital currency, which eventually it'll just turn into, as we know, it'll turn into rationing based on environmentalism, because once the currency goes digital, it's easy to get infinitum inflation because it's just bullshit. It's just figures on a screen. It's not even paper anymore.
Yeah.
So therefore, so it won't last long. You'll probably find that as soon as it goes digital, they'll bring in the new credit system, and that credit system, as I said, is based on rationed control. And it'll be quid pro quo by saying you don't have to work. We'll give you free everything, but it'll be rationed. And people go, yeah, okay, because there'll be so many people out of work through automation. You
Yeah.
know,
I was just gonna
the
say that. Yeah.
majority, yeah, the majority always, like if you're a hunter, seeker, survivor, you'll do quite well. You'll still be able to work in the private side if you understand it. And this is why eventually I'd like to get into what is private, what is public, because the private side is always there. The private sides are linked to the republic. The true republic is the private side. Public side is the democracy in the Bretton Woods system. So yeah, so that's where we're going. So there'll be a gentle shepherd's hand there. You know, they might go, oops, oh, we killed a few million. You know, there'll always be that going on. But generally speaking, they have to show the hand of the shepherd for the sheep. You know, he has to be patting the sheep
Yeah, and I
while
was gonna say
slaughtering.
too, with these crashes and all these, oops, there's this another catastrophe happening. The more
Mm.
they can utilize this tool to apply pressure on the people and put them in a poor situation, the more they can make them feel dependent on them, right? So they can make the people feel dependent on the bankers and the government to go, oh my God, there's
Absolutely.
this huge problem. We need you to solve it for us. And so it's very easy to just design these systems to crash every so often. They know the timing on it. It'll go through a cycle. It's going to last for this long. We'll squeeze as much out of it as we can before it finally goes down. Meanwhile,
Yeah.
while we are trading our man hours and labor for worthless little pieces of paper that mean nothing, they are acquiring real wealth, property,
Mm.
resources, real wealth, things that have tangible
Mm.
value. We're left with
Sure.
absolutely nothing.
Sure. And the other key thing, though, with the wealth of real property goes into a thing called ownership. And
Mm-hmm.
so they're smart enough with all their esoterica. They're smart enough to know what is real and what isn't real. So they're smart enough to know that what is ownership. They know that. What the fuck is ownership? So going back to Rothschild, I think it was himself, said back in 1933, in a maritime equity system, which is from 1933, own nothing, control everything. See, so the
Mm-hmm.
concept of ownership is gone. He said, if you want to be successful in this new system, control everything.
Mm-hmm.
See, so there's a whole new concept of potential freedom too and enlightenment. That's the thing. So the general masses just can't keep up with the technology of insight, of illumination, as they call it. You know, there's always this thing where the most of the people can't keep up with the elite, and so they just create
Yeah.
history and they follow. You know, so if you were born into a family like that, would you go along with it?
It's really hard to say, isn't it?
You know?
Because you'd be raised from a child to go
Mm.
along with that, and
Yeah.
that would just be your environment. That would be, you know,
Yep.
what you
Exactly.
do. Yeah.
Yeah, most would go along with it, and so that's what we're faced with. A lot of people down through history do get a conscience and do come out and do start helping the people, and this is where we get a lot of knowledge. Machiavelli was one of them. He like Orwell came out near the end and started to teach people.
Mm-hmm.
Same with Socrates, didn't he? Socrates came out and started helping them and turning the people kind of against the government by giving them the truth.
Sure.
So yeah, so it is. It's they're just all they're doing is keeping you down. It's like a literal big brother where he's got you and he's holding you down as a little brother, and he's got his hand on your face and going, aha, I've got the cookie jar, you don't, and he's in control. It's simple as that. So we have to pick ourselves up and do some research into what freedom is, true freedom, because obviously, it's not as simple as people think. We need to look at banking and going right down to your public bank too. There's things you can do there that are beneficial that you can start to learn. But of course, when we're talking international banking, we're talking about, as I said, the nobility, the knights, etc. That, and this goes back to the Exchequer. The Exchequer is a London banking fraternity that goes to the Knights Temple, Knights of the Temple of Sol-Omon. That's what it is. Knights of the Temple of Sol-Omon, which is the 3 words for the sun. Sol is Latin for the sun. On is Egyptian for the sun. And what did I say? Yeah, Sol, Om. Om is Hindu for the sun, and On is Egyptian for the sun. So it's a 3 triune again, which is your debtor, creditor, judge. This is why you have Israel, Isis, Ra, and El is a 3 triune again. This is why you have this Father, Son, Holy Ghost is a 3 again, the triune. This is why they have the Jewish Masonic all-seeing eye of Freemasonry on the US dollar. It's a triangle.
Mm-hmm.
It's a circuit court.
Yeah, you'd be amazed how many times you find that sort of trinity of things in places too. There's almost always a trinity. Even in the Abrahamic religions, you look at the Christians, the Muslims, and the Jews, right, have been at war with each other for thousands of years now. Just the trinity. It's
the
always
holy trinity,